January 16, 1941, 0642 hours. Lucca Airfield, Malta. The sun has barely crested the horizon, but the heat is already radiating off the limestone runways. A red glow spills across the Mediterranean, illuminating rows of battered Hurricanes, their fuselages patched, their wings pitted from months of combat. A thin sailor steps out of a slit trench, brushing dirt from his uniform. Aircraftman George Westlake, 22 years old and running on 2 hours of sleep, squints toward the sea. Far out over the water, a faint rumble grows louder. Engines, dozens of them. Westlake freezes, heart pounding, as the shapes materialize through the morning haze. Heinkels, dozens of them. And behind them, Stukas. The Luftwaffe has returned. He fumbles for the field telephone. Raid incoming, bearing 085, they're coming straight for the airfield. Sirens erupt across the base, a wailing metallic cry that echoes through the dusty hills. Mechanics sprint from tents. Pilots race from breakfast tables, grabbing helmets and vests as they run. In the distance, aircraft engines roar to life. Scramble. Inside a sandbagged revetment, Flying Officer John Timber Woods throws himself into the cockpit of a Hurricane Mech Y. Sweat rolls down his neck as he slams the canopy shut. The radio crackles. Hurricanes at Lucca, scramble, scramble. Woods guns the throttle. The engine coughs, spits smoke, then roars alive. He taxis hard, skidding across broken concrete as mechanics dive out of the way. The lead pilot, Squadron Leader Peter Boy Broadhurst, shouts, "Get into the air before the bombs land! Move!" Woods' Hurricane lifts off the runway just as the first wave of German bombers reaches the coast. Below him, black specks detach from the Heinkels. Bombs. The first clash over the island. At 10,000 feet, Broadhurst forms up what remains of number 261 Squadron. 6 fighters, all dented, all exhausted. He scans the horizon and sees them. A massive formation of Heinkel He 111s, escorted by Bf 110s and Stukas, sunlight flashing off their canopies. The Luftwaffe commander in charge of the raid, Oberst Karl Anger, radios his escort. Crush the fighters. Malta must not resist today. But Malta always resists. Broadhurst dives first. Woods follows, stomach lurching as the Hurricane plunges toward the bombers. The sky fills with tracer fire, red, streaking lines tearing past his wings. A Heinkel looms in front of him, its glass nose bristling with machine guns. Woods squeezes the trigger, his 8303 Brownings erupt in flame. Metal shreds, smoke billows. The bomber drops out of formation, spiraling toward the sea. The voice from the ground. Deep in the underground command center, carved beneath Valletta's ancient stone walls, Air Vice Marshal Hugh Lloyd, commander of Malta's air defenses, watches a plot board crawl with enemy markers. The room shakes violently as bombs land above. Dust rains down from the ceiling. An adjutant rushes in. "Sir, Lucca's taking direct hits. We may lose the whole strip." Lloyd clenches his jaw. "We hold the airfields. Without them, Malta dies." He turns to his controller. "Get the fleet air arm in the air. Launch everything that can fly." The controller hesitates. "Sir, that's only 4 serviceable Fulmars." Lloyd slams his fist on the table. "Then 4 will have to do." The Stuka attack. Back over Lucca, the battle intensifies. Stukas scream downward in near vertical dives, their sirens shrieking, the infamous Jericho trumpets. They release bombs with terrifying precision, sending geysers of dirt erupting around aircraft shelters. Woods watches one Stuka peel off, heading straight for a line of Hurricanes parked near the fuel dump. He rolls hard, pulling into a tight climb. "Not today," he growls. He meets the Stuka head-on. The German pilot panics, pulling up too early. Woods' guns rake the Stuka's belly. It bursts into flame, crashing in a fireball short of the runway. But another Stuka slips through and drops 2 bombs onto a hangar. The explosion hurls debris into the sky like shrapnel. The turning point in the first raid. Broadhurst's voice crackles through the radio. 261 Squadron, tighten up, another wave inbound from the north. Woods looks toward the sea, his breath catching. More Heinkels, more escorts. He counts quickly. 20, 30, 40 aircraft. Malta's 6 fighters are hopelessly outnumbered, but they dive again because there is no choice. The Luftwaffe had believed Malta would collapse within weeks, but the island holds. Its pilots refuse to break, its people refuse to bend. As Woods pulls into another attack run, tracer rounds ripping past his wings, he realizes something. The Germans will not take Malta today, and not tomorrow either. The battle for the tiny island fortress has just begun. February 5th, 1941, Grand Harbor, Valletta, 15:10 hours. The afternoon light has turned harsh and flat. casting long shadows over Malta's bomb-shattered stone buildings. Air raid sirens wail again, the 6th time today. Shopkeepers slam shutters, dockworkers sprint for cover, and naval crews leap across gangways to man anti-aircraft guns. But on the shattered quay of Grand Harbor, Lieutenant Commander Robert Stanage doesn't move. He stands rooted beside the damaged destroyer HMS Decoy, jaw clenched, staring at the sky as black dots appear on the horizon. Another wave, another test of survival. Beside him, a young seaman whispers, "When do they stop coming, sir?" Stanage never takes his eyes off the sky. When they've broken us, and we're not broken yet. Luftwaffe escalation. At 20,000 feet, Oberst Karl Anger, commander of Luftwaffe 10's Malta Strike Force, looks down from the cockpit of a Ju-88. Below him lies an island he has bombed for nearly a month, yet it still fights back tooth and nail. He turns to his observer. "We increase pressure. Every day, every hour, Malta must be neutralized before the Africa Corps moves." Anger had calculated Malta would fall quickly. He was wrong. Despite shattered fuel dumps, gutted runways, and relentless bombing, the RAF clings to the island like a wounded but unbroken animal. Life underground. Beneath Valletta's medieval walls, the Lascaris war rooms buzz with frantic activity. The chamber is damp, claustrophobic, thick with the smell of sweat and chalk dust. Maps cover the walls. Plotters push colored markers across a giant table, each representing incoming or outgoing aircraft. A runner shouts into the map room, "Raid 24 approaching, estimated 80 aircraft." Air Vice Marshal Hugh Lloyd rubs his temples. The strain of constant decisions has hollowed his face, but his voice remains steady. "Scramble what we have left, hurricanes only. Full Mars stay on reserve." A controller replies, "Sir, we only have 3 hurricanes ready to fly." Lloyd quietly inhales. 3 fighters against 80 attackers. Then 3 it is, send them. This is Malta, you never have enough. You never stop fighting anyway. The underdogs take flight. At Ta Kali Airfield, little more than a dusty, crater-filled stretch of rock, the ground crews shove the last 3 hurricanes into position. The engines cough, sputter, then roar to life. Leading the trio is Flight Lieutenant George Burgess, a veteran of France in the Battle of Britain. Exhaustion clings to him like oil, but his eyes remain sharp. His wingman, a fresh-faced pilot named Arthur Scarf, mutters over the radio as he straps in. "Sir, it's like charging a giant with a pocket knife." Burgess answers without hesitation. Then aim for the giant's eyes. The 3 hurricanes rise into the sky, specks climbing into a storm of steel. The grinding duel. At 12,000 feet, the hurricanes break through a layer of haze, and the sky explodes around them. Ju-80IAs fill the air in tight formations. BF-110s race ahead, guns flashing. Below, the RAF sees the faint silver glint of SM-79 Sparviero torpedo bombers moving toward the Grand Harbor. Burgess shouts, "Go for the torpedoes! If they hit the ships, we're done!" He pushes his throttle forward and dives. Machine gun fire erupts. Tracer rounds whip past his canopy. The air smells of cordite and burning oil. He fires at a Sparviero. Short, controlled bursts. Pieces of aluminum scatter into the sky like silver confetti. The Italian bomber trails smoke and veers hard, spiraling into the sea. But a BF-110 moves in behind him. Burgess hears the hammering of bullets tearing into his tail. He jerks the stick, too late. A round punches through his canopy, grazing his shoulder. He grits his teeth. Bleeding but still flying. "I'm not done yet," he growls. Civilians in the crossfire. In Valletta's narrow streets, civilians crowd into shelters carved into the limestone cliffs. Mothers clutch infants. Children press their hands over their ears as explosions shake the earth. An elderly Maltese fisherman mutters, "They will never take this island, not while we still have breath." Above them, dust falls from the ceiling with every bomb impact. Outside, the city burns, but the people endure. The day's turning point. As the sun dips low in the sky, a final wave approaches. 50 German and Italian aircraft. Malta has nothing left to throw at them, except one last surprise. A tiny formation appears from the south. 4 RAF Bristol Beaufighters, diverted from convoy escort duty. They climb hard into the bomber stream, cannons blazing. The heavy fighters tear into the formation with brutal precision, shredding Ju-88s and scattering escorts. For the first time that day, Oberst Anger hears panic in his radio channels. "They're behind us! Brake, brake! Twisting right!" The Luftwaffe pull away, limping home with fewer aircraft than they arrived with. Malta survives another day. Night settles over the island, smoke rising into the dark sky like black ghosts. At Lucca, Burgess limps his shot-up hurricane onto the runway. landing on one wheel before skidding to a halt in a shower of sparks. Ground crews rush to him. He waves them off.
"Get the other two first," he whispers. "I'll live."
In Valletta, civilians climb out of shelters into streets filled with rubble.
Malta still stands. Barely, but it stands.
The siege tightens, yet the island refuses to fall. April 20th, 1942. Over the Mediterranean, 06:45 hours. Dawn breaks cold and pale across the sea as a massive formation of aircraft rises from Sicily. Sunlight gleams off the wings of over 120 German and Italian bombers and fighters, the largest strike force yet sent to crush Malta. At the head of the formation, General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, one of Germany's most respected fighter tacticians, surveys the horizon with a hardened expression. He has been transferred temporarily to coordinate the intensified air campaign. He murmurs to his adjutant, "If Malta falls, Rommel's supply lines breathe again. If it survives, Africa is lost."
Below them, the faint silhouette of the island emerges from morning haze, small, defiant, scarred.
The largest siege of the Mediterranean is about to enter its most brutal phase. Inside Malta's underground nerve center, in the Lascaris war rooms, dim lights flicker across sweating faces as operators track the massive incoming raid. The room feels like the inside of a submarine, low ceilings, dripping condensation, and a low hum of tense voices. A spotter calls out, "Raid approaching from the northwest, height 18,000, strength possibly over 100 aircraft." A stunned silence fills the room. Air Vice Marshal Hugh Lloyd closes his eyes for just a moment, steadying his breath. He knows the truth before anyone speaks it. They don't have enough fighters in the air. Not nearly enough. "Scramble everything at Takali and Lucca," he orders, "even the damaged ones."
The controller hesitates. "Sir, damaged means they can barely take off." Lloyd's voice hardens. "If it can fly, it fights."
This is where Malta is now, flying wreckage, praying for miracles. Scramble of the damaged. At Takali Airfield, ground crews drag battered Hurricanes into position. Some have patched wings, others leak oil. One has its landing gear held together with scavenged metal beams from a wrecked bus.
But the pilots climb in anyway.
Sergeant Alan Shaw, barely 19, slaps his fuselage like a stubborn mule.
"Come on, girl, just get me off the ground."
Engines cough awake. Black smoke belches from exhausts. One fighter loses power and dies before takeoff. But 8 make it airborne. 8 fighters to face 100 attackers. The axis descends. High above, Galland can see the tiny shapes of Hurricanes scrambling below, hopelessly outnumbered. He smiles grimly. Their courage is admirable, their chances non-existent. He dips his wings. The Luftwaffe and Regia Aeronautica descend like a metal avalanche. Bombers spread into attack formation. Bf 109s dive ahead, guns flashing. And below them, the island braces. Maltese streets under fire. In Valletta, the air raid sirens scream yet again. Civilians pour into underground shelters carved into ancient limestone. Dust falls from the ceilings as bombs begin to fall. A mother shields her 2 children with her body. An old man whispers prayers in Maltese. A priest helps carry wounded civilians into the shelter. Every explosion shakes the ground like an earthquake. The island is becoming a wasteland, but the people refuse to yield. Hurricanes against the storm. At 12,000 feet, the handful of Hurricanes charges into the bomber stream with suicidal determination. Sergeant Shaw dives headlong into a formation of Ju-88s. Tracer rounds streak past his cockpit. Flak bursts from the bombers, erupt like black flowers around him.
He lines up a shot, fires. A Ju-88's engine explodes in flames, peeling away from formation and plunging into the sea.
Shaw screams into his radio, adrenaline overriding fear.
"One down, going in again."
But a Bf 109 snaps onto his tail immediately. Bullets hammer his fuselage. His starboard wing catches fire. Shaw bails out just seconds before his Hurricane disintegrates. His parachute blooms, a tiny white speck drifting toward the burning island below. Even the sky is starting to run out of heroes. The Royal Navy holds the line. In the Grand Harbor, HMS Penelope, nicknamed HMS Pepperpot for the number of holes in her hull, opens sideways fire with every gun she has left. Her captain shouts, "Concentrate on the torpedo bombers!" The ship rocks from the recoil of her own guns. Shell casings litter the deck. Men shout orders through smoke and chaos. Penelope is barely seaworthy, but she's still fighting. A desperate gambit. Back underground, Air Vice Marshal Lloyd makes a decision that could save Malta, or doom it. He orders a small squadron of bow fighters returning from a convoy escort to divert straight into the massive raid. They have only minutes of fuel left. The operations officer looks horrified.
"Sir, they might not make it back." Lloyd answers,
If they don't intercept this wave, none of us will.
The Beaufighters arrive.
At 0812, 4 Beaufighters roar into the battle at low altitude, each armed with 4 20mm cannons. They attack the Luftwaffe from below, the blind spot. Gunfire erupts, a Ju-88 explodes in midair, an Italian SM-84 spirals downward trailing smoke. Suddenly the massive raid begins to unravel. Bomber formations break apart, escorts scatter. The precision of the attack dissolves into chaos. Galland, watching from above, slams a fist against the side of his cockpit canopy.
Where did they come from? Malta has thrown its last card, and it worked. For today, air superiority is denied. For today, the island survives. Night falls, Malta is burning, but it still stands.
And everyone knows one truth. This siege is becoming a test of will, not just of bombs and planes. July 1942, Sliema, Malta, 1914 hours. The sun sinks into the horizon like a dying ember, turning the sky blood red. The air is thick with heat, dust, and the distant echo of anti-aircraft guns. Along the rubble-strewn streets of Sliema, families queue silently for their daily ration. A cup of rice, a spoon of powdered milk, maybe a thin slice of bread if they're lucky.
Malta is starving.
Above them, black columns of smoke coil upward from fuel depots, warehouses, and shattered neighborhoods. German and Italian aircraft have bombed the island over 3,000 times in the last 3 months. Some days, the Luftwaffe hits Malta 17 times before sunset. The people cling to survival, the RAF clings to existence, and the Axis believes victory is finally in sight. A commander's burden. Inside the Lascaris war rooms, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, newly appointed commander of Malta's air defenses, studies the battle board under flickering lamps. Park is tall, with sharp features softened by exhaustion. His predecessor, Lloyd, gave everything he had, but now it is Park who must hold the line. He turns to his intelligence officer, who hands him a grim report. Fuel reserves, 9 days at current burn rate. Ammunition stores, critical. Spitfire readiness, 30%. Park exhales slowly. Then we must fight smarter and make the enemy bleed for every bomb they drop. He leans over the operations table. No more wasteful scrambling, no chasing decoys. We hit the bombers only when the controllers give me the optimum moment. Park's defensive system is revolutionary, one he perfected during the Battle of Britain. Hold the fighters on the ground until the last possible moment. Launch them directly into the bomber stream. Strike hard. Strike fast, then vanish.
A new phase of the siege begins. Spitfires! Spitfires!
August 10th, 1942. Seoul, 7:03 hours, Lucca Airfield. Thin morning mist clings to the ground as the first wave of incoming enemy aircraft approaches. Radar stations report them as a massive formation, Ju-88s with Bf-109 escorts.
As Park predicted, controllers in the war room call out,
Raid 20 miles out, stand by. Raid 15 miles out, hold fighters on the ground. Raid 10 miles out, prepare to scramble.
Pilots wait beside their Spitfires, engines primed, hands trembling with adrenaline. Finally, scramble, scramble!
Engines roar, dust storms erupt behind spinning propellers. The pilots surge into the sky. Within 5 minutes, 12 Spitfires are airborne, climbing straight into the bomber formation. The first real hope. Flight Lieutenant Teddy Graham squints into the sun. Ahead of him, the sky fills with black shapes, enemy bombers closing fast. He tightens his grip on the stick. Right, lads, straight for the Ju-88s. Ignore the fighters unless they're on your tail. The squadron dives like a blade. Cannons blaze. A Ju-88 blossoms into flame, falling out of formation with a spiraling trail of smoke. Another bomber loses an engine and lurches sideways. A third limps away, thousands of feet below the fight. In the war room, Park watches the plot board as enemy markers begin to fade. He whispers to himself, "Good, they finally feel it. Let them know what Malta is made of." The Luftwaffe commander overseeing the raid, Colonel Walter Inakaris, realizes too late that the RAF has changed tactics. His formation is being torn apart. He shouts into his radio,
Break off, pull away!
But the damage is done. The Ju-88s scatter, bomb loads fall harmlessly into the sea. For the first time in months, Malta breathes. Operation Pedestal, the convoy of desperation. Even with Park's new tactics, the island teeters on collapse. Food is nearly gone, fuel is nearly gone. Without a miracle, Malta will fall. In London, Churchill makes the decision. A massive supply convoy must reach Malta at any cost. Operation Pedestal sets sail. 14 merchant ships and a large escort force, including the aircraft carrier HMS Victorious, battleships, and destroyers. But the Axis knows the stakes. They unleash U-boats, bombers, torpedo boats, and fighters in wave after wave.
The Mediterranean becomes a slaughterhouse. Ships burned, men drowned, convoy after convoy is torn apart. But one ship, one lone battered tanker, refuses to sink. The legend of the Ohio. The tanker SS Ohio, carrying aviation fuel critical for Malta's survival, is hit again and again. Bombs shatter her deck, torpedoes rip holes in her hull, her engines fail, her crew is killed or wounded. Yet she does not sink. Two British destroyers, HMS Penn and HMS Ledbury, literally lash themselves to the Ohio's sides, holding her afloat while towing her toward the Grand Harbor. The sight is unbelievable. A miracle in Valletta, August 15th, 1942, 10:30 hours. The harbor is silent. Civilians line the battered streets, barely daring to hope. And then a siren wails. But this time, it's not a raid warning. It's the signal for an arriving convoy. The Ohio appears around the breakwater, listing heavily, decks torn to shreds, smoke rising from her hull, but alive. Crowds erupt into cheers and tears. People drop to their knees. Priests embrace soldiers. Pilots hug civilians. A Maltese woman cries out, "We survive! Malta lives!" Inside the war rooms, Park closes his eyes and breathes deeply. They made it. Malta is saved, at least for now. September 1942, 22:17 hours above the Mediterranean, west of Sicily. The night sky is moonless, a vast black expanse dotted only by distant starlight. The hum of twin engines cuts through the darkness as a Bristol Beaufighter of 89 Squadron patrols at 8,000 feet. Inside the cockpit, Pilot Officer Dennis Courtney checks his radar screen, the dull green glow flickering with static. Beside him, his navigator and radar operator, Sergeant Bill Foster, adjusts the dials of the AI Mach 4 radar. The system is primitive, finicky, and prone to ghost signals, but tonight, Foster taps the display and freezes. A blip. Another blip. Closing fast. "Dennis, we've got a contact. Bearing 045, range 2,000 yards. Courtney smiles thinly. "Let's go introduce ourselves." He banks right, engines growling as the Beaufighter slips silently into the dark. For months, the Luftwaffe ruled the night skies over Malta, bombing the island under cover of darkness. But now, finally, the RAF has radar-equipped night fighters. And every German bomber in the Mediterranean is about to learn what that means. The first kill under a starless sky. Courtney cuts throttle and lets the Beaufighter drift quietly into position behind the radar contact. The glowing blip grows stronger, closer. Foster whispers, "Range 1, 200, 800, there, I see exhaust flame." A faint amber flicker appears ahead, the engine glow of a Heinkel He 111. Courtney flips the master armament switch. 4 20mm cannons and 6 machine guns come alive beneath his wings. He lines up the shot. For a moment, the night is silent. Then, thum, 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 thum. Shells hammer into the Heinkel's tail section. Flames burst along the fuselage. The bomber staggers sideways, losing altitude. Courtney fires again, ripping through its wing root. The Heinkel plunges into the sea below, a brief orange fireball swallowed by black water. Foster exhales. There she goes, one less bomber for Malta. Courtney nods. Plenty more where that came from. They turn back toward the island, hunters now, not prey. A shift in power. With radar, more Beaufighters arrive. Then the Americans send P-38 Lightnings to join the defense. Malta's own Spitfire squadrons grow in strength. For the first time, Axis pilots begin to feel hunted. German bomber crews whisper nervously about British radar. Invisible, unstoppable. One Italian pilot, after barely escaping a Beaufighter attack, writes in his diary, "The night skies over Malta no longer belong to us. They belong to ghosts." Luftwaffe commanders in Sicily request more escorts, more fuel, more resources. Berlin refuses. Germany is stretched too thin. Malta, the island that was supposed to surrender in weeks, is turning the tide of the Mediterranean. The RAF strikes back. October 1942, Takali Airfield. The roles are finally reversed. Now it is Malta launching raids, not surviving them. Spitfires climb into the sun and dive onto Axis convoys approaching Rommel's Africa Corps. Beaufighters sweep low over the coast of Sicily, strafing airfields and fuel depots. Wellington bombers hit ports at night, guided by radar operators trained in Malta's underground schools. Rommel's supply lines, already starved, begin to collapse entirely. A single convoy destroyed means thousands of his soldiers go without fuel, ammunition, and rations. The Desert Fox himself writes to Berlin, "Without command of the air from Malta, we are fighting with a noose around our neck. The tiny island fortress is strangling an army hundreds of miles away." The Luftwaffe's last desperate push.
In November, with Rommel retreating from El Alamein and Allied forces landing in North Africa, Berlin demands one final, overwhelming attack on Malta. Sicilian air bases fill with aircraft, crews prepare for days. Intelligence officers speak confidently. This time, Malta will fall. But Park is ready. New radar stations ring the island. Spitfire, VC, and IX variants now dominate the skies. Night fighters prowl air lanes with deadly precision. When the final attack comes, the RAF slams into the bomber streams before they reach the coast. Spitfires tear through Ju-88s. Beaufighters blast apart Heinkels in the dark. The Luftwaffe loses aircraft it cannot replace. The Italians lose pilots they cannot afford. The attack dissolves into chaos. Malta survives. Again, always. The siege breaks. By December 1942, the Axis Command quietly ends major air operations. There are no victory reports, no announcements. They simply stop coming. The bombers are gone. The night skies are quiet. Even the civilians notice. One Maltese child asks her mother, "Is the war over?" Her mother smiles sadly. For us, maybe the worst part is. Above them, Spitfires patrol peacefully. Guardians now, not desperate defenders. The siege that once threatened to starve Malta into surrender has turned into one of the Allies' greatest strategic victories. Because the island wouldn't fall. Because its pilots wouldn't break. Because its people refused to kneel. January 1943, Valletta, Malta, 09:22 hours. Morning sunlight spills across the Grand Harbor, illuminating wrecked docks, sunken ships, and entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. Yet despite the scars of 2 relentless years of siege, Malta feels different now. The air is quiet, the sky is empty, no sirens, no bombs. Just the distant clatter of construction crews rebuilding the shattered city, and the return of a sound the Maltese had almost forgotten: laughter. Children run through the rubble, chasing each other near old shelters. Fishermen mend nets along the waterfront. Soldiers sit along the harbor walls, smoking, reading letters, or simply staring at the calm sea. The siege is over. Not officially, but in every way that matters. Malta has survived the greatest sustained aerial onslaught of the Second World War. And now, at long last, the island is ready to strike back. The strategic tide turns. Across the Mediterranean, the impact of Malta's survival becomes undeniable. With the island's airfields intact, Allied aircraft stream south into North Africa. They intercept Axis convoys long before they reach Rommel's forces. Submarines based in Malta sink hundreds of thousands of tons of German and Italian shipping. Rommel's Africa Corps, once feared and unstoppable, now starves for fuel and ammunition. In Berlin, reports pile up. Every convoy to Tunisia breaks apart under relentless attack. The once proud Panzerarmee Africa is reduced to a desperate, retreating force. One German staff officer writes bitterly in a private memo, "So long as Malta exists, North Africa is doomed." He is right. By May 1943, Tunisia falls. The entire German Africa Corps surrenders. Over 250,000 Axis soldiers march into captivity. And the road to Sicily, to Italy, to the heart of Europe opens because one tiny island refused to die. The King's Visit. June 20th, 1943, Floriana Parade Ground. Under a blistering Mediterranean sun, thousands of Maltese civilians gather, many wearing patched clothes and thin from years of rations. RAF pilots stand in crisp lines, their Spitfire insignias gleaming. British battleships boom their salutes across the harbor as King George VI arrives. He has come not only to thank the island, but to honor it. In front of the crowd, the King steps to the microphone. His voice echoes across the cracked stone walls. To the people of Malta, whose bravery and resilience inspired the empire, I present the George Cross. A gasp sweeps through the crowd. Malta, the entire island, every man, woman, and child is being awarded Britain's highest civilian decoration for valor, for enduring the unendurable, for holding the line when collapse seemed inevitable, for refusing to surrender even when the world believed they must. The George Cross becomes the centerpiece of the Maltese flag, a permanent reminder of courage written in blood and fire. A pilot's reflection. That evening, Flying Officer Dennis Courtney stands on the cliffs overlooking the sea. His Beaufighter rests on the runway behind him, its fuselage still scarred from combat. He lights a cigarette and watches the sun dip below the horizon. Beside him, Sergeant Bill Foster breaks the silence. Hard to believe it's over. Courtney nods, exhaling smoke into the warm night air. We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we wouldn't stop fighting. A group of Maltese children laugh in the distance as they chase each other between abandoned AA gun positions. Courtney smiles. This island, this little rock in the sea, it held back an empire. Foster nudges him. Held it back, Dennis? It helped break it. They stand quietly, listening to the peaceful hum of the sea. For once, there are no bombers coming out of Sicily. No explosions, no air raid sirens. Just calm and victory. What Malta meant to the world. Historians would later write that Malta was the fulcrum of the Mediterranean War, a place where courage outweighed firepower, where strategy outweighed brutality, and where ordinary people became legends. From its battered runways, Allied aircraft strangled the Axis lifeline to North Africa. From its deep shelters, radar operators tracked enemy movements with unmatched precision. From its battered ports, submarines slipped into the night, crippling Hitler's Mediterranean ambitions. And through it all, Malta stood, hungry, bombed, exhausted, but unbroken. The island that wouldn't fall became the island that changed the war.